And Rob, I think the level of expectation has been just raised to a whole new level, so I really need to pick up my game here. My name is Laszlo, and it's a really huge and massive privilege for me to be here today, because I've spent already probably 8 years, nearly 8 years now within these walls, initially as an undergraduate adult nursing student, and now as a final year PhD student. And I would like to specifically thank you, Chris, for organizing this event. I wouldn't be here without you, so thank you. Before I'm going to crack on with my story, I have to make an honest confession. I shouldn't be here today. Not because I have anything better to do this afternoon, but because 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago, during the first wave of the pandemic, the medical prognosis for my condition when I got very sick, very ill with COVID-19, was a 40% probability of surviving this condition. And that's exactly 50% more chances of leaving the hospital in a body bag instead of your own feet. And here I am. So spoiler alert, in case you have had any doubts that my story has a happy ending, yes it does. I've survived. And you know, over the past 2 years, I've been called so many things. I've been called a legend, I've been called a hero, and everything in between. But I have to be very honest with you. In my own story, the real hero is not someone who stands right here, right now in front of you. I believe that the real heroes are my wife, who sits now in the audience, and my family, who never stopped fighting, never stopped hoping and believing that we will be one day reunited again. And I'm going to step foot into our family home once again. I believe that the real heroes are the medical and nursing staff working both in Southampton and London, in emergency, in intensive care, on the high dependency unit, on the COVID wards, because they really went the extra mile to save my life, and they have done everything to look after me. And also I believe that the real heroes of my story are that extended circle of family, friends, work colleagues, neighbors, members of our church, and probably a couple of hundreds, if not thousands of people, unknown people that we've never met ever in our lives, who have expressed their care, support, and prayers in so many creative ways over the darkest hours of our most challenging time of our lifetime so far. So today, if you might see yourself smiling or laughing, or from time to time maybe wiping off a tear which was rolling down your cheek, don't be surprised, because it's impossible to tell this story without opening up in front of you, or as one of my friends used to say, without wearing your heart on the outside. So today I would like to walk you through a journey, through a couple of milestones, a couple of chapters of my experience. And I would like to tell you how I got sick, how I got healed, how I got recovered, and a couple of things in between and afterwards. And also I would like to share with you a couple of life lessons that I have learned during this journey. Obviously I'm not going to be able to share with you everything that I have learned, because I don't have enough time for that. However, I have 6 life lessons that I would like to share with you, and I have grouped them into 3 big categories. The first one is going to be the professional dimension. I would like to share with you how it feels for an emergency nurse to see the pandemic, probably the greatest medical threat or healthcare threat of our lifetime, from both ends of the hospital bed. I would like then also to talk about a personal dimension, and to share with you how this experience has changed me in a way, how I see myself and the world surrounding us. And last but not least, because we are healthcare professionals, and we learn to, when we look after a patient, to take into account not just the physical body, but also the psychological, emotional, social, cultural, and spiritual dimension of that individual. I'd like to explore also a little bit the spiritual dimension of my journey, because that was a very important part of the whole, and I would like to share with you something that I have learned through that. Right. Before getting into my story, I would like to tell you a different story, and we are still at the introductions. I do apologize for that. And the reason why I'm going to tell you this other story will make sense as we go along, and hopefully every puzzle piece is going to fall into place once we will reach our destination, the end of my talk. So bear with me, hold my hands, and come with me on this journey. Okay, so once upon a time, there was an old man who was living in a small town next to the sea. And he really loved living there because he was a writer, by the way. And every morning and every evening, he was going for a walk on that beach. And he used that time as an inspiration for his creative work. And one of the nights, there was a terrible storm in that town. And next morning, when he was going out for his usual walk on the beach, he noticed something that he hasn't seen before. Miles and miles of sandy beach covered with starfishes, probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of them. And as he was looking to this very sad scenery, he knew that once the sun is going to come up in its full power, in its full heat, all these starfishes are going to be destined to death. And as he was watching this scenery, he noticed something in the distance. Actually, it wasn't something, it was someone. It was a young man who was walking up and down the beach, and he was picking up these starfishes one by one, and to the old man's biggest surprise, he was throwing them back into the sea. So the old man decided he has to meet this young man, and probably he needs to give him a lecture about life. So he walked down the hill, he approached him, and when he got close to him, he put his hands on his shoulder, and he said, "Young man, I can see that you are very compassionate, you are very enthusiastic, you really want to do the right thing. Although probably you haven't realized up until yet that this beach is miles and miles and long, and it has thousands of starfishes. No matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to make a difference here." So the young man looked to the starfish that he was holding in his hands, that he just picked up very sadly, and he thought for a moment, yeah, maybe this old man is right. I'm not making any difference. But then suddenly a big smile appeared on his face as he swinged his arm and threw back that starfish into the sea. Then he turned to the old man and said, "I might not make a difference for all of them, but I certainly made a difference for that one." So my story goes back, and my COVID story starts in March 2020, and probably we all remember that was the month when UK went into a national lockdown. That was the month where most of the cupboards in most of the UK households have been piled up with toilet paper, baked beans, and pasta. And I can clearly remember the day when I took this picture, this selfie with my colleagues, and just in case you are not recognizing me, is this handsome young man on the right. It was the first day when we had to wear full PPE, which is personal protective equipment, when we went into the resuscitation room. And I told my colleagues, let's take a selfie. This is the first time we are wearing full equipment. Let's commemorate this moment. And later, when I have posted this picture online on social media, I said about it that most of the superheroes have something in common. They are wearing a mask. And it was a time when somehow we felt invincible. We've been working for a couple of weeks already in the department. We've seen day and night a lot of COVID patients, and yet we felt nothing is affecting us. We've been even having conversation from time to time with my colleagues that maybe we went through this disease already asymptomatically and we haven't noticed it. So we kind of like had that kind of false security feeling. And it took just a couple of weeks, or it was 15th of April, when I had to make a phone call to my line manager in ED and to say that I will have to go into self-isolation because my wife has developed some signs and symptoms, and who knows, it might be COVID. I had to go for a staff testing, and on 18th of April I've received a phone call probably I wasn't expecting ever to receive, occupational health called me to say that my test was positive. It took just a couple of days to notice the first few symptoms. I was developing a temperature, my muscles were aching, my joints were aching. I've been constantly feeling tired and exhausted. I wasn't able to sleep during the night, but I still thought I'm going to go through this, and in a matter of days, or maybe in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be back to work again. Because I'm relatively young, healthy, I don't have any pre-existing medical conditions, it's impossible for me to be very sick. Well, I couldn't be more wrong than that. Because a week after my self-isolation, when we took our first blood oxygenation level measurement using a pulse oximeter that we just ordered on Amazon, it turned out that while I was sitting on our sofa in the living room resting on air, my oxygen level was 85%. And the moment I was walking up the stairs, that further declined to 75, 70%. So my wife instantly called the ambulance, and in about 5 minutes they've turned up. So very soon I was passing through the doors of emergency department, this time not as a member of the staff, but as a patient. On the very same day, I was transferred to ITU. It was 23rd of April, and a non-invasive respiratory treatment has been started. In about 2 days, it was kind of like obvious that this is not helping and we need to step up to the next level. And the next level was to use general anesthetic to put me into deep sleep and to intubate me and to connect me to life-supporting machines. Because my condition wasn't improving at all, it was a crucial decision to refer me to a specialist treatment in London with a device called ECMO. And in case you've never heard this expression before, ECMO stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and it's a very clever device because literally what it does, using 2 cannulas inserted into your 2 of your main veins and arteries, it will pump up the blood from your system, it will pass it through an oxygenator which will oxygenate your blood and pump it back into your system. So the main advantage of using this device is that first of all, provides the necessary level of oxygen to your body, and the second advantage is that gives the chance for your lungs to rest and to heal more quickly. So this was the last resort. This was the best possible option to get healed. Well, on I think it was probably 27th or 28th of April when my wife has received a phone call from the hospital. It was one of the consultants telling her that I was accepted in London for this specialist treatment, and now I will have to go through a surgery to have this device connected to my body. And for that surgery, I will have to lie on my back, and because my oxygenation level at that time was already very, very low, probably when I was laying on my back, it was somewhere around 35–40% with 100% oxygen. It was a great concern that I'm not going to survive the surgery itself. So they told my wife that my chances of surviving this is roughly 40%. And also the second thing that they've told her is that if she would like to have a priest, now is the best time. But thankfully the surgery was successful. I was transferred with an ambulance to London. It was 29th of April. And the expectation was that if I'm going to survive this whole journey, most likely I'm going to spend several weeks in intensive care, and part of it is going to be connected to life-supporting machine. And after that, who knows how long in rehabilitation and recovery. And that's when things took a very unexpected turn. Because a week after I was connected to these life-supporting machines, I've been also taken off because my body started healing so rapidly, so unexpectedly, so miraculously that no one couldn't could believe that this is really happening. And on 7th of May, I was already disconnected from ECMO. I was extubated, literally 48 hours after being waken up. Well, I have to be honest, it was kind of a strange feeling to understand how the Big Ben has moved to Southampton when I woken up. But it was a very, very, very rewarding moment to know that I'm alive, I've survived, and things are going to get better from now on. Clearly, also the expectation was that because I went through a very difficult journey, most likely my recovery is going to be very lengthy, and probably I'm never going to return to my former self. I've been told that if my lung capacity is going to go back to 80%, I should be very thankful. So, this was one of the pictures, and the reason why I wanted to share this with you, because it's a funny story. On my last day spent, so I've spent five more days in London, and on my last day I have asked the staff, would it be possible to take home a memory? And they said, what do you have in mind? And I said, can we use one of the hospital gowns and you write me some messages and sign them for me? And I remember one of the junior doctors came to me with a signed gown, and he said, I don't think that this is a very good use of NHS property, but it's totally worth it. So on 11th of May, I was back to Southampton, and I wasn't transferred to intensive care, I wasn't transferred to high dependency unit. My condition was so good that they transferred me straight to a COVID ward. And it took me just 5 days with physiotherapy to get back on feet, and literally after 5 days the physiotherapy team said, actually you've passed the last test, there is nothing else we can do for you. And I was able to mobilize myself, I was able to take a shower by myself, and it was just amazing to see that kind of speedy, quick recovery. And 4 days later I was discharged from hospital, and maybe you might ask, why do I look like someone who has time traveled from the Victorian era? But that's another story for another time. So with with my line manager, we had an agreement there, because she was planning my colleagues to come and to line up on the corridor while I was leaving the hospital. I said to her, I would like to honor them. I would like to show my respect, my gratitude in some way for everything that this hospital, that my colleagues and everyone has done for me. And one of the first things was I would like to smile, but clearly wearing a mask, that's a bit hard. So we came up with the idea that we are going to print out a very cheesy smiley icon, and we are going to stick it to my face mask. So smile solved. The other thing which I had in my mind initially, I wanted to hug and shake hands with everyone. Clearly, because of social distancing, that was impossible. So the decision was that, and I wanted to surprise again my colleagues, that I'm going to be wheeled out on a wheelchair, and then I'm going to stand up and I'm going to walk through them, and I'm going to stand right in front of each of these people, and I'm going to salute them. And one of my colleagues took a video of this. This is probably a 5 minutes video. It's just still incredible looking back, even after 2 years. I think it had probably roughly 50,000 views on Facebook. It was amazing to see how many people, even on their day off, came into the hospital to see me leaving the hospital so soon. And I was so glad to offer that kind of joy, that I'm not leaving the hospital as a broken man, but someone who is able to stand on his own feet and to salute, as a sign of respect and gratitude, all of his colleagues. And this was a photo taken in front of our house on the very same day when I have arrived home. Later that year, during the summer, the hospital asked me to support one of their campaigns called COVID Zero, which was meant to inform public that it was 2020 summer. Everyone thought that the pandemic is over, and we've been trying to be very precautious and to inform the public that actually you still need to respect those measures of washing your hands, keeping the distance, and also wearing a mask. And I've been asked to support this campaign with my story. And when I said yes, I haven't thought that that's the beginning of me becoming a celebrity, because very soon I was featured on BBC, on ITV, on Radio Solent, on the 10 o'clock news, on a documentary. After that, a lot of newspapers were willing to have an interview with me. I never thought I'm going to make the front cover of Daily Echo, for example. And when I thought that, okay, this wave is over, because I was born in Hungary, I was born in Romania, I'm a Hungarian. It's a complicated history. Let me not just go into that. So in my home country, a lot of people knew about my condition, and somehow someone working in the media have heard about my story. So I've ended up a month later doing a lot of television, radio, and newspaper interviews. And after that, there were the hospital and charities and different organizations willing me to speak on their event. So the social media and various online platforms have been filled with my face. I have to tell you, it's quite a tiring job to be a celebrity. I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest. I also had the privilege to speak on one occasion with some members of the parliament when we've been launching this event. And probably during that time was the moment when I have realized, because so many people have heard my story, I need to have a stand on certain things that I truly believe in. And one of the things, for example, was that I truly believed that at that time wearing a mask, keeping social distancing and washing our hands is a very effective way of protecting ourselves. And later on, when the vaccines have become available, I was an advocate of vaccinations, because I knew that this is our way forward to end this pandemic. So I've decided to use social media to promote these ideas, because I knew that people knew my name, knew my story, most likely, if I'm going to say it, it's going to come from someone whose word is reliable. So I've been trying to use these platforms to communicate these messages, and I've been trying to be as wide and as visual as possible. For example, when I had my 3 shots, I was making sure, because UK was one of the first countries in the world, and many of my friends living in different parts of Europe being very skeptic about vaccines, I thought it's going to be a very powerful message, showing them that I was brave enough taking those vaccines, because I truly believe the virus still possesses a much higher threat than the vaccine. So I was posting about my first, my second, and my booster vaccine as well. Also, I've noticed during one of the conversations with one of my friends that using analogies, using metaphors is a very powerful way to communicate a message. I remember at one time someone was telling me that, Laszlo, I truly respect the journey that you've been in. But I think your own story confirms that wearing a mask is just pointless, it's just useless. So you've been working in ED, you've been having access to the highest possible grade of protective equipment, and yet you've been infected, you nearly died. So actually your story tells us that we shouldn't wear a mask. And I said, okay, hold on a second. Tell me this. When you wake up early in the morning and you want to go to your workplace, and let's say you want to drive, you hop into your car, what is the first thing that you're going to do? And the person said, well, probably I'm going to buckle up, I'm going to put on my seatbelt. And I said, okay, perfect, that's exactly what you should do. And I said, now imagine that you are wearing the seatbelt and you are driving to your workplace, and someone fails to stop at a red light and hits you, T-bones you. So you are in the middle of an accident, and you have been injured. would you stop wearing a seatbelt after this event? And he said, well, obviously not. And I said, well, you see, a seatbelt is not going to give you 100% protection. In the same way as a mask is not going to be a 100% assurance that you are not going to get sick, yet still is going to increase your chances of being protected. So I found that using these analogies is a very powerful way to communicate a very important message. Also, probably, I don't need to explain this. This was a post on Facebook which had more than 2,000 shares, and I thought, yeah, it was worth it posting about this. Also, when I got my first shot, and I knew that many of my friends, many people that I know were very skeptic about vaccines, I thought very important to show them the difference, what it means to be exposed to a virus, to a deadly virus, and what it means to be exposed to a vaccine. So on the left, it was me 6 days after getting infected with the virus, and on the right, it's also me 6 days after getting the vaccine. And I think the image talks more than 1,000 words. And this is us 2 years after the pandemic, as a joyful, happy, sometimes crazy family, but we are alive, and we are very, very thankful for that. So, just as I have promised, a couple of lessons that I have learned. I hope I still have time. Good. And the first area that I would like to cover is 2 lessons that I have learned as a professional. And one of them is always see the bigger picture, and the second one, never underestimate the importance of the small things. So let me share with you a couple of quick stories. One of them relates to the seeing the bigger picture. When I got into self-isolation, we've placed an order on Amazon for a pulse oximeter. And because of the troubles with the pandemic, it took them a week for that to be delivered. So during that week, as I was feeling my condition declining, I kept telling myself, I'm fine, I'm going to go through this. It's going to be okay. I felt that I'm not fine, but I didn't have another confirmation to tell me that I'm not fine. And the moment that we have received the pulse oximeter, which probably had a crucial part in saving my life, the moment that I've popped on my finger and I had a value on their little screen, I had another measurement, and I knew that putting the 2 things together, clearly I'm not okay. I need to go right now to the hospital. So whenever you assess a patient, always look to the bigger picture. Don't just assume on one measurement that that's going to define your patient's condition. You need to view things more broadly. Probably the opposite happened with me while I was in intensive care in London. Because all my observations were fine except my heart rate. For some reason my heart rate was having just some very crazy values. It was jumping up to 120 to 140, and I remember a specific day when from intensive care they were trying to put me down to a high dependency unit. And the moment I have arrived in high dependency unit and they've took my observations and they have seen that my heart rate is so high, in 10 minutes I was out. They said they can take anyone whose heart rate is higher than 100. So I was back to intensive care. And the doctors were surprised that, are you feeling okay? And I said, yes, I feel perfectly fine. I can feel in my body that I'm healing, that I'm recovering, I'm on the right route. So, and I think during that time we've been also very, very concerned why my heart rate is so high. And I think Rob told us that there's a new research that came out recently which was saying that the COVID patients are very likely to develop tachycardia, most likely because of the intensity of that exposure that the whole system is put through. And it's going to take probably several weeks or months for their heart rate to go down. And that's exactly what happened. And there was another very good example. When someone is focusing just on a number and not on the bigger picture, they can lose the right direction. Very briefly about this, probably this is something that usually excites people when I start talking about this. when we see a patient under general anesthetic sleeping like a baby, we think that he's just resting and everything is fine and he's having a good time, having a very deep sleep. And I can remember when I was a nursing student and I had a placement in theatres, many of the patients, when they were wakened up after the surgery, they've been asking me, and when are you going to start? Well, we finished already. So this is how you feel when you are just for a short period of time under general anesthetic. Now, when you are for several days or weeks under general anesthetic, that's a completely different story. I can tell you that during those days, probably a whole week, more than a week, while I was deep asleep, I had loads and loads of nightmares and terrible dreams. And because time passes differently when you are asleep, sometimes days felt like weeks in my dreams. And I'm not quite sure if you had those dreams where you've been dreaming but you weren't sure, is this real? Is this really happening now? Or am I just dreaming? And that's exactly, you are kind of like trapped in a world where you have no idea how you ended up being there, and all you know that you want to escape, you want to go to a place that you know, and you can't. And for example, one of my dreams, I had several different dreams. One of my dreams that I was stranded on a cargo ship on the Indian Ocean, I think, or somewhere in Southeast Asia, because the whole crew was Asian, and because the cargo ship was stranded, we've been waiting for the rescue team, and it felt like I've spent weeks on that ship waiting for the rescue team to come. And I had no idea how I ended up on that ship, or whose idea was that in my condition from Southampton to take me to the Southeast Asian Sea for some reason on a cargo ship. So, and this is why when I have woken up, I know that the nurses in London were very concerned that it's going to be a shock for me that I'm in London. And actually it was a relief. When they told me that you are in London, I was like, whew, thank you, back to earth again. So it's very interesting. There's so much more to tell you about this, because it's a very interesting way how our brain, our consciousness, our soul works. And it was a very, very interesting experience. And I kind of like understand now why so many COVID-19 patients who went through the disease the hard way end up having PTSD or flashbacks or different kind of psychological issues. Right, talking about small things. One of the small things which we very often neglect, I would say probably, especially during the pandemic, probably this has become even worse, is the power of a human touch. Wearing gloves and wearing protective equipment made us more aware of keeping a distance even from our own patients. And I've never had panic attacks in my whole life. And I remember one of the nights in ITU in London, I just had a panic attack, and one of the nurses came, sit next to me, she hadn't said a word. She just held my hand for a couple of minutes, and when she has seen that I'm okay, she left. And that was kind of like a reassurance. What a powerful thing is to have another human's being touched. So very often when we do clinical observations or we chat with our patients, putting the hand on someone's shoulder or touching someone's hand, sometimes we don't realize how powerful that simple gesture can be. Another funny story, when I came back to Southampton, I was very keen to get back on my feet. I wanted to walk again, to feel normal again. And on the very first night, because my catheter has been removed and I was very keen to use my organs as they have been destined to be used, one of the nights I have pushed the nurse caller, and when the nurse came in, I said, would you mind helping me to walk to the toilet? And she said, well, if it's that hard for you to walk, would it be okay to bring you a bedpan? And I said, I thank you very much for the offer, but if I have to crawl to the toilet, I will crawl, because I'm very determined to get back and to feel again how it feels to, excuse my language, to pee in a toilet, as every human being would do. And he said, yeah, okay, it's fine, I'm going to help you. And that was for me another example that sometimes as healthcare professional we try to take shortcuts. We try to find the easy way to solve a problem, and we don't look at things from the patient's perspective. Yes, it was a bit more work helping me walking to the toilet, but it helped me to regain that independence, that stability, and to overcome that pajama paralysis that we all fight against. And going through this process made me understand that these little steps contribute of a patient leaving the hospital much sooner. And another factor for that, believe it or not, was personal grooming. I remember when I came back to Southampton, and it was probably the first time when I had the chance in weeks to look in a mirror, I was scared, because what the person was looking in the mirror back to me looked like a caveman, and I said, that's definitely not me, so I need to change that. And I've asked one of the staff nurses, please, can you bring me a razor, a fingernail clipper, and a couple of things so that I can look again as a human being. And I remember I was wheeled into one of the toilets, and I've spent probably 2 hours of washing my hair, clipping my fingernails, shaving, and so on and so on. Every 10 minutes someone was knocking on the door. Are you all right? Yes, I am. And I have to be honest, it felt like I felt like a different person the moment I've looked into the mirror and someone more familiar looked back to me. So never underestimate how much it means just to help someone to have a proper shave, to have a haircut, or even something minor. It can give back that kind of dignity that we all need to move ahead from that patient status. Right, I promised you a couple of things about my personal journey, and I'm going to talk to you about 2 things. Don't ask why, and talking is healing. There's an American writer, I think I'm going to pronounce, I hope I'm going to pronounce his name correctly, called, no, I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly. So he's a bestseller writer, and many years ago, he wrote a book called When Bad Things Are Happening to Good People. And because he has some Jewish roots, he was interviewing for his book a lot of Holocaust survivors. And one of the things that he was very interested in, how is it possible that someone who goes through very horrible, horrific things and sees things that no human beings should ever seen in his lifetime is still able to establish a family, to have a hope, to live a joyful life? How is it possible that someone is able to overcome these experiences? And one of the interesting results, and one of the interesting things that he raises in his book, is that whenever you go through a very difficult experience, never ask the question why, or at least don't ask it too often. Clearly it's healthy to make the connection between cause and effect, but he says that the more often you ask the question why this is happening to me, why exactly me, I had to be the person going through this, he says that the more you ask these questions, that is going to keep you in that state, that is going to keep you in the past. You won't be able to move forward. And he proposes in his book a different question. He said, instead of asking the question, why me, ask the question, now that this happened to me, what am I going to do about it? And I remember I was laying in my bed in intensive care in London, and I was asking myself the very same question. And I could clearly see 2 options in front of me. Either I'm going to go down a route where I'm going to start blaming myself, NHS, and the whole wide world why this happened to me, or the other route is to be thankful that I'm alive, to feel gratitude for everything that people has done for me, and to see how can I embrace this experience and turn it into gold? And it was amazing to see that this simple decision have managed to put me in a completely different position. And the second thing that I have learned, very important, is very often people decide to bottle up their difficult or very sad experiences and not to talk about it. Sometimes people say that I have a cupboard with a lot of drawers and I have a drawer for every single memory that I don't want to talk about ever. And I remember very often people were asking me the question, are you feeling comfortable talking about your experience? Especially when I was talking in front of an audience. And I always said, yes I am, because I've made a conscious decision again that I'm not going to bottle up my experience, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to express what I went through, because that's going to be part of my healing. And I specifically remember a couple of, again, funny episodes during my hospital stay. When I came back to Southampton, one of the consultants who met me probably twice for 5 minutes, after our second meeting, as he was leaving the room, he said, "Laszlo, you should be a motivational speaker." And I said, "Yeah, I know." Then I've made, again, a decision that whoever is going to come into my side room and is going to be interested about my story, I'm just going to talk about it. And I remember a final year nursing student was working on that COVID ward when I was where I was recovering, and she came in just to do some observations, and we started chatting. And she left 45 minutes later. She said, "Oh my gosh, I should take some more observations." And I also remember another episode when I've been offered by the hospital if I would like to speak with a specialist to offload my emotional, psychological burden as part of my healing. And I said, "Yeah, of course." And they said they will provide me a 1-hour session with a specialist. So the specialist came in, she sat down, she asked one question. I started talking for about an hour, and the one thing that I have noticed at the end of that 1 hour, that she started crying. And I can tell you that probably without the ability of talking about my experience and not bottling it up, probably my psychological, my emotional journey would have been very, very different. And last but not least, as I have promised, an important part of my journey, the spiritual part. And one of them is believe in miracles, and the second one is prayer works. And just to give you a little bit of background before I'm going to get into these two lessons that I have learned here. I was born behind the Iron Curtain, and probably this says something about my age. And I was raised in a family where my parents were atheists. And I can remember that we only went to church when there was either a wedding or a funeral, one of the two extremes. And I also remember when I was a teenager, someone has given me as a gift a Bible, and I've started reading the first page of the New Testament, and I said to myself, "Oh my goodness, even the phone book probably is much more interesting than this book." So I said, I'm never gonna hold this book in my hand ever again. And a couple of years later, I was invited to a church where probably for the very first time I've seen that people are not coming to a sermon because of an obligation, but because they want to. And they were really enjoying their faith, they were really enjoying their relationship that they had with God. And it was the day when I have decided that I would like to experience the same joy that these people are experiencing. And that was the day when that very distant God, Jesus Christ, has become my best friend, and that very boring book called the Bible has become what I call the instruction manual for life. Because what is an instruction manual? Very often when we buy an electronic product, we throw the instruction manual into the corner. We say, "Oh, I know how to use this, don't worry." And a year later, when we pick up the instruction manual, we just realize that there are so many functions that we haven't used on this device, and it makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable. And then we realize that there is a chapter called troubleshooting, so whenever something goes wrong or life is malfunctioning, actually there is a solution for that. And now fast forward to my experience. As I've been telling you at the very beginning, I've been called so many names. And one of the names that I've been called by my own hospital in one of their publications was our very own miracle man. And also, a lot of newspapers were coming down with this headline, miraculous recovery. So why this label of miracle man and miraculous recovery? I think probably the first time this has been used was by the doctors, by the consultants back in London, because they just simply couldn't explain how exactly this person who had much bigger chances to end up in a body bag or to spend several weeks in intensive care has healed so quickly. And how exactly his recovery was so quick. I still remember when I get home being discharged from the hospital, 2 weeks later I was out in the garden doing some DIY and gardening, and one of my neighbors was speaking over the fence, "Laszlo, shouldn't be you resting in the bed?" And I said, "Well, I was resting for a month. Finally, I'm out here doing something meaningful." And I truly believe that miracles are Christmas gifts or birthday presents from God. Because very often we think that something good is happening to us because we've been so good or perfect or we have never done anything wrong. But in fact, when you receive a gift, when you receive a present, either at Christmas or on your birthday, it's not because you've been so good, it's because the person giving you that gift loves you so much. And that's exactly what I have experienced during this miracle, that someone up above loved me so much. And the final thing, prayer works. When I had woken up, I was so surprised to find out that not just here in the UK, not just the people that we knew were praying for us almost constantly, but a lot of people that we've never met in our whole life on 4 different continents were doing the same thing. And I can tell you now loads and loads of different stories and feedbacks, because I've received hundreds, if not thousands, of messages from different people from all around the world who knew about my condition and were cheering me to get well. But probably one of the stories that I will share with you relates to one of my colleagues in ED. She was a fellow nurse with a Scottish origin, and after I was discharged from the hospital, she came to me and she said, "Laszlo, you know, while you were very, very sick and you were at the borderline of life and death, I called my grandmother and I've told her, Grandma, you know, I don't have faith. I'm not going to church. I don't believe in prayer. But my friend needs desperately prayer. And I know that you go to church, so please, would you pray for him? And more than that, can you please ask your whole church to pray for him?" And that was so moving, and it worked. So, one of my final thoughts, and I'm going to close here, is whenever you feel that whatever you do is not making a difference, have a different perspective in viewing your own life, your own actions. Because if I'm going to look back now to my own journey, and because of the large media coverage, probably my story has reached millions of people. However, when I have received messages from different people telling me that because of me, because of my story, they have decided to get vaccinated, or they have taken more seriously the mask wearing, or they went through a very similar degree of being affected by COVID-19, but they have decided not to give up hope and to fight it through. Or when people told me that actually their faith has been restored, seeing what has happened in my life. I truly believe that if if I have managed to make a positive impact or influence on just one person, this whole journey was worth it. And whenever you look to your own job, whenever you look to your own life, if you make an impact on just one person, it was worth it. Because you can be that boy or girl who throws back the starfish into the sea. Thank you so much.